Isabella grew up in a world that most children could only dream of. Her father, Don Ernesto, was a wealthy businessman whose name carried weight in the city, and whose home was a sprawling mansion surrounded by high walls and perfectly trimmed gardens. The house was filled with every luxury imaginable: crystal chandeliers that sparkled in the sunlight, rooms painted in rich colors, and furniture that gleamed with polish. But despite all the beauty around her, Isabella often felt a quiet emptiness inside. Her mother had passed away when Isabella was very young, and although her father loved her in his own way, he was a strict man who spent most of his time working. His affection was measured in rules, expectations, and lessons on propriety rather than hugs or laughter. Because of this, Isabella's days were a mixture of structured routines and long stretches of solitude. She attended the finest schools, wore the most elegant dresses, and was surrounded by servants who made sure her every need was met. But these comforts could not fill the longing she felt for something more: a friend, someone who could understand her not as a millionaire's daughter, but as Isabella. One of the few people she had formed a quiet connection with was Rosa, the family's maid. Rosa was warm and caring, always moving quickly to tidy up the house or prepare meals, yet she had a gentle smile that made even Isabella, who was used to people keeping their distance, feel at ease. Rosa had a son named Miguel, a boy a few years younger than Isabella. He was strong, kind, and had a mischievous sparkle in his eyes that mirrored his mother's warmth. Miguel and Isabella lived in very different worlds under the same roof. While Isabella spent her mornings learning languages or practicing piano, Miguel helped his mother with chores, ran errands, and sometimes sneaked into the garden to watch Isabella play from a distance. He didn't see her as untouchable or perfect, he simply saw her as a girl who laughed too little, as someone who looked lonely behind her expensive dresses and sparkling jewelry. Their first real conversation happened by accident one afternoon. Isabella had been trying to climb a tree in the garden, something her father had forbidden because he thought it undignified. She had reached only halfway when the branch she was holding onto cracked slightly, and she almost fell. Miguel had been passing by with a watering can, and without thinking, he reached out and steadied her. "Thank you," Isabella had said, her cheeks pink from fear and embarrassment. "You should be more careful," Miguel replied, shrugging as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You could have hurt yourself." That moment was small, but it marked the beginning of something new. Isabella was surprised that Miguel spoke to her without fear or awe. He didn't bow or mumble formal words. He treated her like a normal person. And for the first time in a long time, Isabella felt like someone saw her as herself, not as a symbol of wealth. Over the following weeks, Isabella began to notice Miguel more often. She would see him reading under a tree, or hear him humming quietly while sweeping the floor. Sometimes, she would leave a small basket of fruits for him in the garden, and he would smile in thanks. Slowly, they began talking, first in short, careful sentences, and then in longer, more comfortable conversations. They laughed about small things, like how a bird kept stealing crumbs from the patio, or how the garden cat always disappeared when Isabella tried to pet it. But their growing friendship was not without challenges. Don Ernesto noticed that Isabella was spending more time outside and more time speaking with Miguel, and he frowned. "Don't waste your time with the servants' children," he warned her one evening after dinner. "You have a future to protect. You must mingle with your own kind." Isabella felt a pang of sadness, but she didn't stop seeing Miguel. She had discovered something in their friendship that no lesson, no rule, no warning could take away: honesty, trust, and kindness. Miguel never judged her, never told her what she should do, and never demanded anything from her except a moment of shared laughter or conversation. Miguel, for his part, was careful too. He knew the dangers of crossing invisible social lines. He didn't want to get Isabella in trouble, and he certainly didn't want to anger her father. But when he saw her sitting alone on the garden bench, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt, he couldn't help but join her. They would talk about everything and nothing: her dreams of seeing the world beyond the mansion, his stories of small adventures in the neighborhood, his thoughts on life, and even his hopes for the future. Through these quiet conversations, Isabella began to see the world differently. She realized that life was not just about dresses, jewels, or lessons in etiquette. She saw courage, patience, and strength in Miguel, and she admired the way he treated his mother and the people around him. Miguel, in turn, admired Isabella's curiosity and imagination, and the way she could dream of things beyond what she had been told to accept. Despite the warmth of their friendship, both of them were painfully aware of the boundaries. They lived in the same house, but the world outside that mansion had rules that they could not ignore. The servants whispered about how unusual it was for the millionaire's daughter to spend so much time with a maid's child. Other children at school would tease Isabella if they learned she had a friend beneath her station. And above all, there was Don Ernesto, whose approval was necessary for everything Isabella did. Yet, even with all these invisible chains, Isabella and Miguel found freedom in their secret moments together. They would race through the gardens, pick wild flowers, and sit quietly by the fountain, talking about dreams that felt impossible in the world of wealth and status. They learned to trust each other in a way no one else had earned. One rainy afternoon, when the sky was gray and the gardens shimmered with water, Isabella and Miguel sat under the old oak tree. Rain droplets fell around them, and for a moment, they felt as if they were in a world all their own. Isabella rested her head against Miguel's shoulder, feeling a sense of comfort and safety she had never known. Miguel, in turn, felt a quiet pride in being able to protect and support someone he cared about. It was in these small, stolen moments that the foundation of their friendship was built. Not in grand gestures or dramatic events, but in the simple acts of caring, listening, and being present for each other. They shared joys, small frustrations, and even fears. And though they both knew the social gap between them was wide, they didn't let it define their connection. As days turned into months, Isabella's relationship with her father remained formal and distant, but her friendship with Miguel grew stronger and deeper. She learned to see beyond wealth, to value courage, honesty, and kindness. Miguel learned that friendship could transcend social barriers, and that sometimes, the bravest thing a person could do was to simply be there for someone else. And so, in the quiet corners of the grand mansion, where servants worked diligently and the world seemed far away, a unique bond blossomed between a millionaire's daughter and the maid's son. It was a bond built not on wealth, privilege, or obligation, but on trust, laughter, and the small moments that made life meaningful. Little did they know, however, that this bond would soon be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined, an event that would force courage to the forefront, blur the lines of social status, and reveal who truly had the heart of a hero. But for now, as the sun set over the mansion, casting golden light over the gardens and the fountain, Isabella and Miguel simply sat side by side, two friends sharing a quiet world, unaware that the story of their lives was about to change forever. Hidden corner of the mansion's vast gardens. Every day, they found little ways to meet, sometimes in the early morning before the house woke up, or in the late evening when the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the sky with soft colors. These moments were precious to them. Isabella loved the feeling of freedom she experienced with Miguel, and Miguel cherished the laughter and joy he could bring to her life. It was a bright spring morning when Isabella first realized just how much she enjoyed Miguel's company. The mansion was unusually quiet that day. The servants were busy preparing for a small garden party that Don Ernesto was hosting later in the afternoon. Isabella had grown bored of her usual lessons and decided to explore the gardens, where she knew Miguel would be helping his mother with the flowers. "Good morning, Isabella," Miguel said cheerfully, brushing dirt off his hands. "You're up early today." Isabella smiled and twirled around, her dress fluttering in the breeze. "I wanted to escape all the noise in the house. It's too quiet in there, but here, it feels like I can breathe." Miguel laughed softly, handing her a small watering can. "Well, you're welcome to help. The flowers need water, or they'll complain." She giggled at his words and knelt beside the flower beds. As they worked side by side, they talked about everything that crossed their minds. Isabella shared her thoughts about the stories she had read, while Miguel spoke about the little adventures he had in the nearby streets when running errands for his mother. Their conversations were easy and natural, and for a while, they both forgot about the differences in their lives. As the days passed, Isabella became braver in expressing herself. She asked Miguel questions about his dreams, and he, in turn, asked her about her hopes beyond the mansion walls. "I want to travel the world someday," Isabella confessed one afternoon as they sat under the shade of a tree, their legs dangling over the garden wall. "I want to see mountains, oceans, and cities I've only read about. But I feel like I'm trapped here, like my life is planned out for me before I even get a chance to choose." Miguel listened quietly, his eyes serious. "You're not trapped, Isabella. Maybe it doesn't feel like it yet, but you have a choice. You just have to be brave enough to take it." Isabella's eyes lit up at his words. There was something in Miguel's voice, a quiet confidence, a belief in possibilities that made her feel stronger. For the first time, she felt like someone really understood her. But as their friendship deepened, the boundaries of social status became harder to ignore. Don Ernesto noticed Isabella spending more time outdoors and less time following his strict schedule. He frowned when he saw Miguel walking beside her, laughing and talking as if they were equals. "Isabella, you should not spend so much time with the staff's children," he told her one evening after dinner. "You have responsibilities. You must focus on your studies and the friends you are meant to have." Isabella nodded politely, but inside, she felt a pang of defiance. She valued Miguel's friendship more than the rules that her father imposed. She had learned that Miguel treated her with honesty, without pretending or flattering her. He saw her as a person, not as the daughter of a wealthy man. Miguel, on his part, also felt the weight of the invisible barrier between them. He knew that being friends with Isabella openly could bring trouble. Other children at school might mock Isabella, and the staff at the mansion might gossip. But he could not ignore the moments when Isabella needed someone by her side, or the times when he felt he could make her smile in a way no one else could. One afternoon, a small incident tested their bond. Isabella had been trying to learn how to ride a bicycle that had been stored in the garden shed. She wobbled unsteadily and nearly fell, crying out in fear. Miguel, who had been nearby, ran to steady the bicycle and guided her carefully. "Thank you, Miguel," Isabella said, gripping the handlebars tightly. "I don't know what I would do without you." "You would do fine on your own," Miguel replied, his voice gentle. "But it's okay to let someone help. Even the strongest people need a hand sometimes." The simplicity of his words touched Isabella deeply. In that moment, she realized that friendship was not about wealth or status, it was about trust, support, and understanding. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion continued its rhythm of work, study, and occasional entertainment. But the friendship between Isabella and Miguel became a quiet secret, a treasure that neither of them wanted to lose. They found ways to spend time together without attracting attention. Sometimes, it was by the fountain in the early morning, or in the garden when the sun was low. Other times, they simply shared conversations across the hedge, exchanging small gifts or stories from their lives. Their bond also became a source of courage for Isabella. She started exploring the gardens more boldly, climbing trees and running along the paths, laughing without worrying about the watchful eyes of the household staff. Miguel, who always seemed to anticipate her needs, would often be there to guide her safely, sometimes hiding his concern behind a teasing remark or playful joke. One afternoon, while they were sitting near the edge of the garden pond, Isabella confided in Miguel about her feelings of loneliness and isolation. "I feel like I don't belong anywhere," she admitted softly. "Even with my father, even with all the people in this house. I feel like something is missing." Miguel thought for a moment before speaking. "Maybe what's missing isn't a person or a place. Maybe it's someone who sees you for who you really are. And maybe that's what friendship is, it's finding someone who believes in you, even when the world doesn't." Isabella smiled at him, feeling a warmth she had never experienced before. She realized that Miguel was more than a friend, he was someone who made her feel seen, valued, and understood. Despite their growing closeness, both knew that their friendship was delicate. They lived in different worlds, and any misstep could lead to serious consequences. Yet, the risk never deterred them. Each meeting, each shared laugh, strengthened their bond and made their world a little brighter. Miguel, too, was learning from Isabella. He admired her courage and her imagination, and he often found himself inspired by her curiosity about the world beyond the mansion. He began to dream bigger, imagining possibilities he had never considered before. And while he remained careful not to overstep boundaries, he always made sure Isabella knew she had someone in her corner, someone who would stand by her no matter what. One rainy day, as the sky turned dark and clouds threatened to pour over the garden, Isabella and Miguel found themselves sheltering under the large oak tree. Rain dripped from the leaves, and puddles formed around them. Instead of running inside, Isabella laughed at the sight of the rain, splashing water with her shoes. Miguel joined her, and soon both were soaked, laughing uncontrollably. That day, Isabella realized that life did not have to be perfect to be joyful. The garden, the rain, the simple company of a friend, these were the moments that mattered most. Miguel, watching her laugh freely, felt a sense of pride and happiness he had never known. In her joy, he found purpose, and in her friendship, he found a connection that transcended the boundaries of wealth and status. As spring turned to summer, Isabella and Miguel's friendship grew stronger. They explored every corner of the mansion gardens, shared dreams under the night sky, and found comfort in each other's presence. The world outside remained rigid and structured, but within their secret spaces, they discovered freedom, trust, and a bond that neither of them had expected to find. Little did they know that their friendship, so quietly nurtured, would soon face a challenge unlike anything they had imagined. A test of courage, loyalty, and quick thinking was approaching, one that would reveal the true strength of their bond and change the course of their lives forever. For now, however, Isabella and Miguel continued to enjoy their hidden world, two friends from different worlds learning that trust, kindness, and shared laughter could bridge even the widest gaps. And as the sun set over the mansion, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, they sat together in the garden, unaware of the adventure that awaited them. The summer sun shone brightly over the mansion and its gardens, casting warm light on every corner. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, and the sound of birds filled the spaces between the tall trees. It was a perfect day for a family outing, and Don Ernesto had decided to take the family to their private lake estate a few miles outside the city. The lake was a serene place, surrounded by tall oaks and willows, with crystal clear water that reflected the sky like a giant mirror. Isabella had been looking forward to this trip, but not because of the grandeur of the estate or the luxurious boat rides. She was excited for the chance to be outdoors, to explore, and to share another adventure with Miguel. Early in the morning, Isabella helped her father pack for the trip, carrying small items in her hands, while Miguel, who had been invited to help his mother with the preparations, joined them secretly in the carriage. Don Ernesto didn't know that Miguel was going along. He assumed that Miguel would remain at the mansion helping Rosa. But Miguel, determined to spend more time with Isabella and secretly keep her safe, had managed to accompany them without attracting attention. When they arrived at the estate, Isabella's eyes lit up at the sight of the lake. She ran ahead of the carriage, her laughter echoing across the water. Miguel followed, keeping a careful distance, just enough to give her freedom while still being nearby. The lake was calm, with gentle waves lapping at the shore, and the sunlight danced on the water, creating sparkling patterns that mesmerized Isabella. She could feel the tension of the past months slowly melting away as she breathed in the fresh, cool air. Isabella's father had arranged for a small gathering that afternoon, a few family friends, their children, and a couple of staff members who would help serve food and drinks. But Isabella was not interested in the adults or their polite conversations. She wanted adventure, and she wanted Miguel by her side. They wandered along the edge of the lake, skipping stones and looking for small fish that swam near the shore. Be careful, Isabella, Miguel said, his eyes following her as she leaned over a large rock to get a closer look at a school of tiny silver fish. The water can be deeper than it looks. I know, Miguel, she replied, smiling up at him. I just want to see them better. I promise I won't go too far. Miguel's voice carried concern, but he stayed a few steps behind, trusting Isabella's judgment while preparing to act if anything went wrong. He had learned to respect her independence, even though he sometimes worried that her curiosity could lead her into danger. As they explored the shoreline, Isabella spotted a small dock that extended into the lake. It seemed almost magical in the sunlight, and she felt a strong urge to step onto it. The dock creaked under her weight, but she continued forward, drawn to the water that glistened invitingly. Miguel ran to keep up, his heart beating faster as he realized how far she was venturing. Isabella, maybe you shouldn't go too far, he warned, reaching out as she stepped onto the end of the dock. The water can be dangerous. But Isabella, caught in the excitement of discovery, didn't hear him fully. She leaned over the edge of the dock to touch the water with her fingers. It was colder than she expected, sending a shiver up her spine. She laughed at the sensation and reached further to try and scoop up some water, losing her balance slightly. In that instant, a small misstep sent her toppling into the lake. The cold water shocked her, and she instinctively flailed, unable to keep herself afloat. Panic rose quickly in her chest as the current began to pull her slightly away from the dock. She called out for help, her voice sharp with fear. Miguel didn't hesitate. Without thinking about the water's depth or the risk, he dove in after her. The cool water enveloped him, and he swam toward Isabella as quickly as he could, his arms cutting through the surface. He reached her just as her strength began to fade, grabbing her firmly to prevent her from sinking further. Hold on, Isabella. I've got you. Miguel shouted, trying to keep his own panic under control. The sound of their cries echoed across the lake, drawing the attention of others nearby. The people on the shore, adults who had been enjoying their conversation, stared in shock. Some moved quickly toward the water, unsure of what to do. Don Ernesto's face turned pale as he realized what had happened. His eyes searched frantically for his daughter, and when he saw Miguel holding her in the water, his heart stopped for a moment. Miguel, using all his strength, managed to swim back toward the dock. His muscles burned from the effort, but he refused to let go. Isabella clung to him tightly, her fear slowly giving way to trust. She realized, at that moment, that it was not the wealth, the staff, or the safety of the estate that saved her. It was Miguel, the boy she considered her friend, who risked everything to protect her. When they finally reached the shallow part of the lake, Miguel carefully helped Isabella out of the water. Both of them were soaked, and Isabella's dress clung to her, but she was alive. She gasped for breath, her eyes wide with gratitude and fear. You saved me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Miguel smiled, though he was exhausted. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." Don Ernesto arrived at the edge of the lake, his expression a mix of relief and astonishment. He looked at Miguel, his eyes wide. It was you," he stammered. You saved my daughter." Miguel nodded, a little embarrassed by the attention. "I couldn't let her get hurt, sir," he replied simply. The adults around them began to applaud, though their clapping was mixed with disbelief. Don Ernesto, who had always been strict and formal, felt a wave of emotions he hadn't expected. He realized that Miguel, the maid's son, had acted bravely without hesitation, while the trained staff and bodyguards had hesitated. Isabella, still shivering, looked at Miguel with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered again, holding his hand tightly. "You didn't have to, but you did." Miguel shrugged modestly, trying to downplay his courage. "I couldn't just stand there," he said quietly. "I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't help." That afternoon, the mood at the lake was different from before. The adults had become more cautious, and everyone kept a closer eye on Isabella. Don Ernesto stayed near his daughter, his mind racing with thoughts about Miguel's bravery. For the first time, he saw beyond social status and wealth, he saw courage, loyalty, and selflessness. Isabella, on the other hand, felt a mixture of emotions. She was grateful, amazed, and inspired by Miguel's actions. She realized that true friendship was not about titles or privileges, it was about trust, courage, and being there for someone when it mattered most. In the days that followed, the incident at the lake became a turning point for everyone involved. Don Ernesto began to view Miguel and Rosa differently, recognizing their integrity and devotion. Isabella's admiration for Miguel grew deeper, and their friendship strengthened in ways that words could not describe. Miguel, too, felt a sense of pride, but also a quiet awareness of responsibility. He knew that he had acted bravely, but he also understood that the bond he shared with Isabella was delicate and precious. He promised himself that he would always be there for her, no matter what challenges might come in the future. The lake incident was a reminder of many things, that courage could come from unexpected places, that true friendship transcends social barriers, and that life could change in an instant. It was a day that none of them would ever forget, a day when bravery, loyalty, and trust revealed themselves in the most extraordinary way. And as the sun set over the lake that evening, casting golden and pink hues across the water, Isabella and Miguel sat together on the shore, quietly reflecting on what had happened. They didn't need to speak, the bond between them had grown stronger in a single, life-changing moment. And while the world around them remained divided by wealth and status, they had discovered something far more valuable, a friendship that could withstand fear, danger, and the uncertainties of life. After the lake incident, the mansion felt different to Isabella. The sun still rose over the sprawling gardens and crystal chandeliers gleamed in the hallways, but the quiet intimacy she shared with Miguel had changed everything. The rescue had left an impression not only on Isabella but on everyone who witnessed it. Even Don Ernesto, who had always been strict and distant, could no longer ignore the bravery and character of the maid's son. The morning after the lake incident, Isabella awoke with a mix of relief and excitement. Her body still ached from the cold water, and her wet clothes had taken hours to dry, but the gratitude in her heart outweighed every discomfort. She hurried through the mansion corridors, her mind buzzing with thoughts of Miguel. She wanted to see him, to thank him again, and perhaps to share a laugh about the adventure they had just survived. Miguel, meanwhile, was quietly tending to chores in the garden, trying to act as if nothing had happened. He had always been humble, avoiding attention even when others praised him. But inside, he felt proud of himself, not for recognition, but because he had done the right thing. Saving Isabella had been instinctive. Her life mattered more than any rules about social class or fear of consequences. When Isabella found him near the rose bushes, she ran up to him, her hair still damp from the lake, and grabbed his hands. "Miguel! I can't stop thinking about what you did. You saved me, and I," her voice faltered, overcome with emotion. Miguel smiled, trying to hide his own emotions. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." "Really, Isabella, it's nothing special. Anyone would have done the same." Isabella shook her head firmly. "No, Miguel. You did something extraordinary. You didn't think about yourself at all, and I'll never forget it." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "I wish I could show you how much I appreciate you." Miguel felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride and humility. "Your thanks is enough," he said softly. "Really?" Word of Miguel's bravery spread quickly through the household. The servants whispered about the daring rescue, their admiration growing by the minute. Rosa, Miguel's mother, hugged her son tightly when she heard the story, tears in her eyes. She had always known he was brave, but seeing him act so selflessly filled her heart with pride and relief. Even the mansion staff, who often followed strict routines and avoided involvement in the family's personal matters, began to treat Miguel with a new level of respect. They had always seen him as a helpful boy, quiet and obedient, but now they saw courage, quick thinking, and a sense of responsibility that went far beyond his years. Don Ernesto, however, was the one most deeply affected. The image of Miguel plunging into the cold lake to save his daughter haunted him. For the first time, he began to question his assumptions about social class and loyalty. He realized that courage and goodness could not be measured by wealth or status. Here was a boy from humble beginnings, who had risked everything without hesitation, while trained bodyguards and advisors had hesitated in fear. Over the next few days, Don Ernesto found himself observing Miguel more closely. He watched how the boy interacted with his mother, how he treated the other staff, and even how he cared for Isabella. He noticed the small details: the way Miguel listened carefully, the way he spoke with respect but also honesty, and the way he seemed to understand people without judging them. Slowly, Don Ernesto began to feel a deep sense of admiration and gratitude. Isabella, too, noticed the change. Her father's behavior toward Miguel had softened. He no longer discouraged their interactions, and sometimes even allowed Miguel to sit with Isabella during lessons or meals. Isabella felt a mixture of relief and happiness. She had longed for someone who could be a true friend, and now that friendship had been acknowledged in a way she had never imagined. The days following the lake incident were filled with small, meaningful moments. Isabella and Miguel spent time together in ways that were both ordinary and extraordinary. They walked through the gardens, laughed over playful races, and shared secrets in quiet corners of the mansion. Each moment strengthened their bond, and each smile and conversation built trust and understanding that neither could ignore. One afternoon, as they sat near the fountain, Isabella looked at Miguel thoughtfully. "You know, I've always felt like I didn't belong in this mansion," she said quietly. "I had everything, but sometimes it felt like I had nothing. And now, after what happened, I feel like I've finally found someone who truly understands me." Miguel smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "I think you've always belonged, Isabella," he said softly. "You just hadn't found the right people who could see you for who you really are. And, maybe I'm lucky to have found you too." Their conversation was interrupted by Rosa, who came to call Miguel for lunch. She looked at them with a gentle smile. "You two have been spending a lot of time together," she said kindly. "Don't forget to eat, Miguel." Miguel nodded, standing up reluctantly. "We'll be there in a minute, Mother," he said, glancing back at Isabella. As the weeks passed, life slowly returned to normal in the mansion, but the events at the lake left a lasting impact. Don Ernesto began to reflect on his own behavior, realizing that he had been too focused on wealth, status, and appearances. He began to show more warmth toward Isabella and more respect toward Rosa and Miguel. He started listening more, observing more, and even asking for Miguel's advice on small matters around the estate. Isabella noticed these changes and felt a sense of hope. She realized that courage and kindness could inspire change, even in the hearts of those who seemed unchangeable. She felt proud of Miguel, not just for saving her life, but for showing her and her father the true meaning of bravery and selflessness. Miguel, despite all the attention and praise, remained humble. He knew that his actions were not about recognition, they were about doing the right thing. But he also realized that his courage had opened doors for him, not just in the mansion, but in the hearts of those around him. He felt a sense of purpose, understanding that being true to oneself and helping others could create a ripple effect that changed lives. One evening, Isabella and Miguel sat by the window, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in hues of gold and pink, reflecting on the calm surface of the fountain below. Isabella turned to Miguel, her eyes shining with gratitude and admiration. "I can't thank you enough, Miguel," she said softly. "You didn't just save me in the lake. You've changed my life, and even my father's. I'll never forget what you did." Miguel shook his head gently. "You don't have to thank me, Isabella. I did what anyone who cared would do. I just I'm glad you're safe." In that quiet moment, they both understood the depth of their friendship. It was no longer just about shared laughter or stolen moments in the garden. It was about trust, courage, and the knowledge that they could rely on each other, no matter what challenges came their way. The mansion, with all its grandeur and rules, continued its daily routines, but something had shifted. The invisible walls of status and wealth had been softened by courage and kindness. Don Ernesto's heart had opened, and he began to see his daughter and Miguel not just in terms of rank or duty, but in terms of their character and humanity. And as Isabella and Miguel sat together that evening, watching the sun disappear behind the horizon, they both felt a quiet sense of hope. They knew that the world outside the mansion could be harsh and unforgiving, but they also knew that with courage, loyalty, and friendship, they could face anything together. The lake incident had been more than a moment of danger. It had been a turning point, a revelation of bravery, trust, and the power of doing what is right, even when it is difficult. It had changed their lives forever, and the lessons they learned that summer would stay with them, guiding their hearts and actions for years to come. Summer gradually shifted toward autumn, and the mansion began to feel different after the lake incident. The events that had unfolded by the water had left a lasting mark, not only on Isabella and Miguel but on everyone in the household. There was a newfound sense of respect, understanding, and connection that had quietly grown in the days following the rescue. The mansion, with its grand halls and shining chandeliers, now felt warmer, less rigid, and more alive. For Isabella, the experience by the lake had changed her in ways she could not fully describe. She had always lived a life of comfort and luxury, yet she had often felt confined by the expectations placed upon her. But now, she understood that life's true value was measured not in wealth or appearances but in courage, trust, and genuine connections. Miguel had shown her that friendship and loyalty mattered far more than titles or social status. Every morning, Isabella found herself thinking about Miguel, not just as a friend but as someone who had risked his own safety to protect her. She realized that the world could be unpredictable and dangerous, and that people's actions, brave, selfless actions, were what truly defined them. Miguel had become her anchor, someone she could depend on in any situation, and that realization gave her a new sense of confidence and gratitude. Miguel, on the other hand, had gained a quiet strength from the experience. Though he remained humble, he carried a sense of pride in his heart. He understood that courage was not about seeking recognition, but about doing the right thing when it mattered most. Saving Isabella had been instinctive, but the consequences had taught him the importance of responsibility, trust, and steadfastness. He now felt more certain of who he was and the values he wanted to uphold, no matter what life might throw at him. Life in the mansion slowly settled back into a rhythm, but the bond between Isabella and Miguel grew stronger with each passing day. They continued to meet in their secret corners of the garden, sharing conversations, laughter, and dreams. Isabella would often confide her hopes for the future, and Miguel would listen patiently, offering encouragement and perspective. Their friendship had grown beyond mere companionship. It had become a source of strength, comfort, and inspiration for both of them. Don Ernesto, too, experienced a profound change. The lake incident had forced him to confront his own assumptions about social class, courage, and loyalty. Seeing Miguel act with such bravery and selflessness had opened his eyes to the true character of the boy he had once considered just a servant's child. Slowly, he began to treat Miguel with the respect and recognition he deserved. He involved him in small decisions, asked for his advice on household matters, and even praised him in front of the staff, a gesture that filled Miguel with quiet pride. Rosa, Miguel's mother, watched these changes with cautious happiness. She had always known her son possessed courage and integrity, but she also understood the delicate balance of their world. Now, seeing the respect Miguel received from Don Ernesto and the admiration from Isabella, she felt a deep sense of relief and pride. She knew that her son's actions had not only saved a life but also earned him a place of honor in the hearts of those around him. One afternoon, Isabella and Miguel sat beneath the oak tree in the garden, the same tree where so many of their conversations and moments had begun. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting gentle shadows on the ground. Isabella looked at Miguel thoughtfully. You know, she began softly, I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the lake. It wasn't just that you saved me. You've changed so much in my life, and in my father's life too. Miguel shook his head humbly. I just did what I thought was right. You're my friend, Isabella. I couldn't let anything happen to you. Isabella smiled, her eyes shining. I know. But it means more than you can imagine. I feel like I can face anything now, because I know there's someone like you in my life, someone who cares, who is brave, and who always has my back. Miguel felt a warmth spread through him. He had never expected such words, and yet he knew that their friendship was now stronger than ever. It was no longer a secret connection in the gardens, it was a bond built on trust, courage, and shared experiences. As autumn arrived, the mansion hosted fewer gatherings, and the days grew cooler. Isabella and Miguel continued their secret adventures, exploring the gardens, collecting leaves, and talking about the world beyond the estate. They dreamed of traveling, of seeing new places, and of experiencing life outside the boundaries of the mansion. Even though the realities of their social status remained, they found comfort in the knowledge that their friendship could overcome any obstacle. Don Ernesto, observing their interactions, began to reflect on his own life. He realized that wealth and status had often blinded him to the most important qualities in people: kindness, courage, and loyalty. Miguel had shown him that true value was found not in possessions but in character. Don Ernesto began to take small steps toward change, listening more, showing warmth toward his daughter, and recognizing the efforts of those who worked diligently in his household. Isabella, too, grew in confidence and independence. She realized that while she could not escape her responsibilities, she could choose how to live within them. Miguel had taught her that bravery came in many forms, not only in facing danger but also in standing up for what was right, supporting others, and trusting oneself. Their bond became an example to those around them. The household staff saw that social barriers could be softened by kindness and respect. Friends who visited the mansion noticed Isabella's changed demeanor. Her laughter was more frequent, her confidence stronger, and her joy more visible. Even Don Ernesto's associates commented on the girl who had been timid and reserved, now growing into a young woman with strength and grace. As the year progressed, Isabella and Miguel continued to share their dreams and hopes. They spoke of traveling together one day, of seeing the cities and landscapes they had only read about, and of helping those in need. Each conversation deepened their friendship and strengthened their resolve to face life's challenges with courage and determination. One quiet evening, as the mansion settled into calm, Isabella and Miguel sat by the fountain, watching the water reflect the fading sunlight. Isabella turned to Miguel, her eyes thoughtful. You know, I've learned something important this year, she said softly. It's not wealth, status, or rules that matter most. It's courage, loyalty, and having someone you can trust completely. And you've shown me all of that. Miguel smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. We've both learned, Isabella. Life is full of surprises, and we never know what challenges we'll face. But as long as we're honest, kind, and brave, we can handle whatever comes. Isabella nodded, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. She realized that her friendship with Miguel was one of life's most precious gifts, a bond that could never be broken by status, wealth, or circumstance. It was a friendship built on trust, courage, and shared experiences, a friendship that would guide them through the years ahead. As the sun set completely, casting a golden glow over the mansion and gardens, Isabella and Miguel sat in comfortable silence, knowing that they had found something rare and valuable, a friendship that transcended social boundaries, a bond strengthened by bravery and trust, and a connection that would remain with them for the rest of their lives. The lake incident, the moments of fear, and the quiet days in the garden had all led to this point. Isabella had discovered courage and trust, Miguel had discovered his own strength and integrity, and together, they had shown that true friendship and bravery were far more powerful than any obstacle. In the years that followed, Isabella and Miguel's friendship continued to grow, inspiring those around them and serving as a quiet reminder that courage and kindness could change lives. Don Ernesto remained proud of both his daughter and Miguel, understanding that life's greatest lessons often came from the heart rather than from wealth or status. And so, in the quiet corners of the mansion, amidst the gardens, fountains, and sunlit rooms, the millionaire's daughter and the maid's son carried with them a bond that would last forever, a bond built on trust, bravery, and the simple truth that sometimes, the most extraordinary acts come from the most unexpected people.